Finally, we can say goodbye to the insanity that was the year 2016. From Harambe to the election to protests of all shapes and sizes, shocking celebrity deaths, unlucky sports champions, Johnny Butabi getting a girlfriend. Is there anything that didn't happen this year? Even WWE did some stuff this year that no fan would have seen coming. Some of it good, some of it bad. And this week, I'm going to rank the best and the worst of the company in 2016. Let's get the worst out of the way first. Number 8. Too many shows, too few wrestlers. When I first started watching wrestling as a teenager, it was all I wanted to watch. It was all I thought about. To me, Mondays with Raw and Nitro and the Saturday morning shows, that wasn't enough for me. I wanted wrestling every day of the week. So here we are in 2016, we have wrestling out the ears, and WWE has completely flooded the market with wrestling content this year. Ever since the brand split, you have a 3-hour pay-per-view on Sunday, a 3-hour Raw on Monday, 2 hours of SmackDown on Tuesday, 205 after that, Talking Smack after that, and then an hour of NXT on Wednesday. That's 11 hours of WWE programming across 4 days every other week, and it's not even including Impact, New Japan, Ring of Honor, the stuff in your local area, the things on the Fight TV app. We as wrestling fans are completely socked in with wrestling content. And when you throw in the fact that the rosters and the hierarchies therein have been pretty much stagnant ever since the brand split, that can lead to burnout from the fans and overexposure of the talent, which is quite possibly a devastating combination. Number 7. Roman Reigns' world title push. Only at the very end of 2015 did WWE finally figure out how to properly book Roman Reigns, and for a split second the fans bought into it, but within a couple of weeks, by the time the new year rolled around, it all went to shit. By the Rumble of this year, the company was laying on this whole Roman versus authority stuff pretty thick. Fans could see past this shameless, transparent attempt to recreate the magic of Austin versus McMahon, though instead of having someone like the Rattlesnake to root for, fans had to deal with this guy who was far less charismatic and likable. Reigns was booked pretty poorly in the Rumble match itself, where he was taken out with an injury, yet he was able to walk away under his own power, but he came back later even though he was injured. Anyway, he was eventually eliminated by the future champion, Triple H, who, logic dictated, really should have been a big heel, but the fans cheered for him because, hey, in the last couple of years, the company's completely forgotten how to build someone up that the fans can get behind. While all this was happening, fans were still very much behind Dean Ambrose, but at this point the company was using him as a popularity cipher to try and give Roman Reigns some cred. It didn't work. The Roman Reigns Triple H match at WrestleMania this year was completely lackluster. It went on for way too long, and honestly it exposed Roman Reigns. Not a good look for someone who's supposed to be carrying the company for the next umpteen years. Reigns won the belt at Mania, and then he held it for a few months, but then lost it at Money in the Bank after violating wellness, and that was the end of that. A terrible way to end 2 terrible years of trying to build this guy as the next top star. Number 6. James Ellsworth. Before you Ellsworth fans freak out, relax. He's going to be in the Best of Countdown too, okay? Ellsworth was the first victim of Braun Strowman's Summer Squash Tour 2016, and while most people thought that was the end of that, apparently the writers at SmackDown looked at him and said, "I've got it! This is going to be our replacement for John Cena in the main event scene!" Since becoming a regular on the Blue brand this fall, Ellsworth has been deeply intertwined in the Dean Ambrose-AJ Styles rivalry over the WWE Championship, even resulted in Ellsworth getting 3 straight wins over Styles, even though one of them was by DQ and 2 of them were due to a shitload of interference. Not a good look for the champion. By all accounts, Ellsworth is a fine worker, but when you look at other people on the main roster and on NXT who've been there for a long time, getting passed over time and time again for a shot, and now in favor of a guy like Ellsworth, it's kind of galling. A lot of fans have pointed out the similarities between this storyline, like Colin Delaney and the Eugene Triple H storyline from years past, but I've already explained in other videos why it's not quite apples to apples. If Ellsworth were booked more competently or had a better look, we might be talking a different discussion about James Ellsworth. God only knows what they're going to do with him in 2017. Number 5. The Cruiserweight Division on Raw. The Cruiserweight Classic on the network was damn near revolutionary. A bunch of indie names from around the world wrestling exciting matches on an island completely separate from Raw and SmackDown. It was splendiferous. So when Raw announced this past summer they were going to be introducing the Cruiserweights to Raw exclusively, you had to hope for the best, but expect the worst. In a creative move that was almost too similar to the disastrous Divas Revolution of 2015, a handful of CWC competitors were dropped onto Raw with little to no fanfare. Oh, don't get me wrong, they certainly had a bunch of vignettes saying the Cruiserweights are coming, but never once did they tell you why you should care. Aside from a few pre-taped interviews, there was virtually no character building, no mythos developed about the competitors. Brian Kendrick was the most fleshed out person in the division, but a lot of it had to do with the fact that he was an established wrestler from years before. They did the same thing with the Cruiserweights in 2016, they did with the women in 2015. Just shove a few of them out on stage and say, cheer them, this is what you want, right? Awesome, our work's done. But in wrestling, you have to show, not tell. They were given this heightened importance by giving their own segments and their own color schemes, but in the end, the Cruiserweights on Raw are just window dressing. There's live action commercials for 205 Live, which is a show that should have existed from the beginning after the Cruiserweight Classic. Everything going on Raw right now with the Cruiserweights is doing a disservice to what the CWC built up. Number 4. Finn Balor's injury. 2015 was a banner year for doctors, surgeons, and physical therapists because it seemed like every other week a WWE star was going down with a massive injury. In a refreshing change of pace, even though there were still some injuries this year, the overall number was way low compared to 2015. However, there was still one injury this year that dealt a huge blow. Finn Balor tore his labrum at SummerSlam after taking a running powerbomb into the barricade at the hands of Seth Rollins. Old Demon Boy popped his shoulder back into place, finished the match, won the match, and became Raw's first ever Universal Champion. But because of his injury, he was forced to vacate the title the next day and go into surgery, which he's still recovering from. There are tons of stories out there of wrestlers who get injured in the days or weeks before a big championship match, and still lots of stories of wrestlers who win a title then have to vacate it after getting injured before their time is up. But very rarely do you hear stories of wrestlers who suffer grievous injuries in the middle of the match where they win the championship. Honestly, the last time I can remember something like that happening was 19 years ago at SummerSlam when Steve Austin broke his neck in the same night he beat Owen Hart for the IC title. This sucked for a number of reasons. One, he had just come onto the main roster after killing it in NXT. Two, he was prepped to become the new face of Raw in the wake of this brand new brand split. And third, this new belt that they wanted so badly to legitimize right out the gate took a huge hit when their first pick to win the belt went down with an injury. Here's hoping Balor comes back strong in 2017 and gets back into the big red belt scene. Number 3. Seth Rollins' botched face turn. Tell me if this story sounds at all familiar to you. A detested heel who's an objectively good wrestler goes down with a freak injury and is sidelined for months. He heals up, returns to a massive hero's welcome, and takes down the champion that everyone's booing, whether or not that was the intended reaction. This is, for all intents and purposes, what should have happened when Seth Rollins came back after his knee exploded. The parallels were obvious, the stage was set, and the fans craved it, but Seth came back at Extreme Rules and everybody cheered, but he immediately went back to his pre-injury ways, cutting heel promos on the audience and being buddy-buddy with Stephanie McMahon. It took 3 months for Seth to finally turn face, and when it did happen, it was for the absolute stupidest reason. Triple H doesn't like me anymore! WWE could have done some amazing stuff with Rollins as a heroic badass, but they totally squandered the opportunity. How could they, though, when the fans so obviously wanted to cheer for Rollins? How could they not have seen the fact they wanted to cheer for Rollins when they just showed this big documentary on the network showing Rollins in this sympathetic light during his recovery? It was one of the most flagrant cases of the left hand not knowing or caring what the right hand was doing. Number 2. Daniel Bryan's retirement. On a Monday morning in February of this year, after taking several months off with health problems due to concussions, Daniel Bryan announced on Twitter he'd be making a formal retirement announcement that night on Raw. Now, Daniel, you fooled us all once before with this the year before, remember? We're not falling for this again, okay? But sure enough, that night, he retired. No swerves, no surprises, no gotcha. He got in the ring, said he was going to retire, and he did. Daniel Bryan's career, in particular those last couple of years, were an emotional roller coaster ride. Being cast aside despite his enormous popularity, being placed into the WrestleMania 30 main event, winning the title on one of the grandest stages at a huge moment, but having to drop that belt a couple of months later due to injury, fighting back to win the Intercontinental title at Mania 31, having to drop that belt due to injury, and then all the months of infighting with the company, trying to get back into the ring, getting cleared by different doctors, only to eventually be forced into retirement. It's got to be one of the worst feelings in the world to have your hand forced and to walk away from something you truly love. Since his retirement, in my opinion, the entire upper to mid-card scene of the company has suffered tremendously in his absence as a wrestler. No one has been able to capture the hearts and minds and the imagination of the fans like Daniel Bryan did in his peak. Will he come back for one more match against The Miz at Mania 33 like logic dictates it's probably going to happen? Will he unretire once his contract expires and can work other places? Who knows for sure, but I question if it's the right thing to do, even if for a fleeting moment given his health. No matter what happens with Daniel Bryan in the future, whether you like him or you don't, I think I speak for everyone when I say I just hope that he's happy and healthy. And the number one worst thing that happened in WWE in 2016 was WrestleMania 32. If I were to go back and update my worst WrestleManias countdown from a couple of years ago, I would do two things. One, I would swap WrestleManias 25 and 27, and two, I would remove 25 and replace it with this stinker. In fairness, the company was in a tough spot going into this show. So many people were going down with injuries, there was no way they could make a cohesive Mania card that made sense all across the board. You could argue they were just working with what they had, but after looking at how they booked the actual show, it's clear they weren't just victims of circumstance. The League of Nations defeated the ultra-popular New Day, and they got beat up by some legends, no forward progress was made, and the team dissolved within months. Brock Lesnar beat Dean Ambrose in one of the most anticlimactic street fights in recent memory, only needing one F5 to take down a guy who had previously no-sold what announcers called a crushed trachea. Shane McMahon lost to The Undertaker, which meant he couldn't control Monday Night Raw, except he totally did do that for weeks. And on top of that, up until recently, there was a big question mark as to The Undertaker's status for WrestleMania 33, meaning that him winning might not have mattered either. Baron Corbin won a battle royal featuring DDP, Tatanka, and Shaq. The Rock trash-talked the Wyatts into oblivion, and at the end of it all, Roman Reigns finally got his big WrestleMania moment, beating Triple H for the championship and basking in the glow of a record-setting number of booing fans. And that's the real kicker in all this, the attendance. Somewhere between 93 and 101,000 fans, yours truly included, packed AT&T Stadium, hoping to see a show for the ages, something that would justify this record-setting crowd, and they just didn't deliver. Sure, there were some good moments, like Zack Ryder winning the ladder match at the top of the show, that awesome AJ Styles Chris Jericho match, the women's match was really good, the women's title match, Shane falling off the cell was a great moment, but in the end, nothing mattered about this show. There were no ramifications for this show. Nothing mattered in the end. It was a pointless WrestleMania. The biggest takeaway with this show was, if you're a newer up-and-coming star, you can get fucked, because we have Austin, The Rock, Shawn Michaels, Mick Foley, Undertaker, and Brock Lesnar all here to put you in your place, because hey, who cares about building for the future, right? And that's why WrestleMania 32 was the worst thing to happen to WWE in 2016. Did I miss anything from this year? Let me know what you thought was the worst of the worst in the comment section below. And stay tuned for this Thursday when I reveal what I thought were the best things that happened to the company in 2016. Be sure to thumbs up this video if you like it, subscribe to Wrestling with Regret, and buy the t-shirts at ProWrestlingTees.com. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.